Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Hub. Today's story is one of my favorites.
Picture this, a woman in her early 50s, impeccably dressed even for a Tuesday evening art therapy session, sitting ramrod straight in a circle of folding chairs like she's attending a board meeting instead of dot dot dot. Well, whatever this was supposed to be, that was me. Chelsea Wright, art critic for the city's most prestigious magazine, recently divorced and absolutely convinced that therapy involving finger paints was beneath my intellectual capacity. The community center smelled like acrylic paint and desperation. At least, that's what I told myself as I clutched my purse and wondered how quickly I could escape without my therapist. Dr. Martinez finding out. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the mismatched canvases propped around the room. Other participants, a mix of ages and backgrounds, were already dabbing at their paintings with the kind of earnest concentration that made me want to roll my eyes. I hadn't wanted to be there. Art therapy? Please. I critiqued art for a living. I didn't make it. My world was gallery openings, wine tastings, and carefully crafted reviews that could make or break an artist's career. I analyzed brushstrokes, deconstructed color choices, and wrote thousand-word pieces about the socio-political implications of a single sculpture. The idea that I would sit in a circle and, what? Express my feelings through watercolors? It was laughable. But after my divorce after David walked out with his secretary who was younger than some of the wine in our collection, my therapist had insisted. "It'll help you process," she'd said, her voice gentle but firm. "Chelsea, you've spent your entire career analyzing other people's emotional expressions. Maybe it's time to explore your own." I had scoffed, then fought, then eventually given in with the kind of resigned grace I usually reserved for particularly tedious gallery openings. So there I was, holding a paintbrush like it might bite me, staring at a blank canvas that seemed to mock my complete lack of artistic ability. The instructor, a kind woman named Sarah, had encouraged us to paint our feelings. What was I supposed to do with that? Paint the color of alimony negotiations? The texture of sleeping alone in a king-sized bed? That's when she spoke. "You're holding that brush like it insulted your mother." I blinked, turning to find the source of the voice. And there she was. Fiona Martinez, though I didn't know her. Name yet. Paint-streaked overalls that looked like they'd seen 1,000 art projects. Wild, curly hair the color of dark chocolate, escaping from what had probably started as a neat ponytail. Her hands were stained with colors I couldn't even name, and when she smiled at me, it was with the kind of mischief that made my stomach flip in a way it hadn't in years. "I'm here under duress," I replied, because honesty seemed like the only response to someone who'd seen through my careful facade so easily. "Aren't we all?" she said, grinning wider. And then she did something that would change everything. She nudged my canvas, that sad gray blob I'd been pushing paint around on, and dipped her own brush into red. "Here, start with something that feels." When her fingers brushed mine as she guided my hand, something electric shot through me. Not just attraction, though there was that, sudden and surprising, but recognition. Like my soul had been waiting for this moment, this person, without me even knowing it. Our first unofficial meeting was supposed to be about art. Fiona had asked for feedback on her portfolio after that initial art therapy session, and I'd agreed professionally, of course. It was what I did. I critiqued art. I could certainly spare an hour to look at a local artist's work and offer some constructive feedback. We met at Grind Coffee on 5th Street, one of those places with mismatched furniture and local art hanging on exposed brick walls. The kind of place I usually avoided because it tried too hard to be authentically bohemian. But Fiona had suggested it, and something about her made me want to say yes to things I'd normally dismiss. She was already there when I arrived, sitting. At a corner table with a portfolio spread out before her, and a half-empty mug of what looked like the strongest coffee they served. She was doodling on a napkin, her tongue peeking out slightly in concentration, and I found myself standing in the doorway just watching her for a moment. There was something magnetic about her complete absorption in whatever she was creating. The way her hand moved across the paper with confident strokes. "Chelsea," she called out when she spotted me, waving me over with a paint-stained hand. "Thanks for doing this. I know you're probably busy with important art critic things." I slid into the chair across from her, smoothing my skirt and trying to ignore the way her smile made my pulse quicken. "It's fine. I'm always interested in supporting local artists." It was a lie. I rarely had time for unknown artists, preferring to focus on established names and gallery darlings. But something about Fiona made me want to make an exception. She pushed the portfolio toward me, and I began flipping through her work. Abstract paintings that seemed to pulse with energy, portraits that captured not just physical features, but emotional states, landscapes that made me want to step into them. Her technique was raw but skilled, emotional but controlled. It was ... really good. "This piece is derivative," I said, pointing to a painting of intersecting circles in primary colors. It was meant to be a professional critique, the kind of honest feedback that would help her grow as an artist. "Derivative of what?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Of every postmodernist who thinks splattering paint is profound," I replied, falling into my familiar role as the discerning critic. Instead of being offended, she laughed. Loud, unapologetic, the kind of laugh that made other customers look over with smiles. And something in my chest tightened, because when was the last time I'd heard laughter like that? When was the last time I caused it? "You're not wrong," she said, still chuckling. I was going through my angry at the establishment phase. "But what about this one?" She flipped to a painting I hadn't seen before, a woman standing at a window, her reflection showing a different expression than her actual face. The technique was flawless, the emotion raw and honest. "This," I said, studying it more carefully, "is extraordinary." Her smile softened, became something more intimate. "It's called The Critic. I painted it after our first session, actually." I looked closer and felt my breath catch. The woman in the painting, it was me. Not literally, but the posture, the careful composure, the way she held herself apart from the world. And the reflection in the window showed something different: vulnerability, longing, a softness I'd forgotten I possessed. "You see a lot," I said quietly. "I see you," she replied, and the words hung in the air between us like a promise. That's when she slid the napkin toward me, a caricature of me scowling at my first art therapy session, but drawn with such affection that it became something endearing rather than mocking. And for the first time in years, I felt heat rise to my cheeks. I was blushing. Chelsea Wright, who had faced down pretentious gallery owners and temperamental artists without flinching, was blushing because of a napkin drawing. "You're very talented," I managed to say, though what I really meant was, "You see me in ways I've forgotten how to see myself." "Want to grab dinner?" she asked, and I said yes, before I could think of all the reasons why I shouldn't. The first time we slept together, I panicked. Not because it wasn't good God, it was good, better than good. It was revelatory. It happened 3 weeks after that coffee shop meeting. 3 weeks of dinners that turned into long conversations, of gallery openings where she was my plus one, of moments when I'd catch her looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, but that made my heart race. She'd come to my apartment after a particularly intense art therapy session. I'd been struggling with a piece my therapist had asked us to paint our ideal self, and I'd stared at the blank canvas for an hour, paralyzed by the impossibility of the task. "It doesn't have to be perfect," Fiona had said, sitting on my Living room floor with paint supplies spread around her like she belonged there. Just paint who you want to be. I don't know who that is anymore, I'd admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something shifted in the air between us. I think you do, she'd said softly. I think you're just afraid to let her out. The kiss that followed was inevitable. Soft at first, tentative, and then deeper when I responded by pulling her closer. We made love on my Egyptian cotton sheets, her hands mapping my body like she was memorizing it, my name falling from her lips like a prayer. But in the morning, when I woke up to find her sleeping beside me, her dark hair spread across my pillow, I felt the panic set in. She looked so young in the morning light streaming through my bedroom windows. Her skin was unlined, her body firm and strong from years of physical work, and me, I felt every one of my 52 years. The crow's feet around my eyes seemed deeper, the soft flesh at my waist more noticeable. When had I gotten so old? When had I started carrying myself like a woman who'd given up on being desired? You're thinking too loud, Fiona mumbled, not even opening her eyes. I froze, caught in my spiral of self-doubt. She turned to face me, her eyes still heavy with sleep, but alert enough to read my expression. If you're about to say something stupid about age, don't. My breath caught, because that was exactly what I was about to do. I was about to launch into a speech about how she deserved someone younger, someone who could match her energy, someone who wasn't carrying the baggage of a failed marriage and a lifetime of carefully constructed walls. Fiona, I don't, she said firmly, propping herself up on one elbow. I know exactly how old you are, Chelsea. I know you're divorced. I know you have a mortgage and a 401k and probably a very detailed skincare routine. I know you're not 25, and I'm not interested in 25. She reached out, tracing the line of my jaw with one finger. I'm interested in you. The woman who can take apart a painting with surgical precision and then put it back together with 3 perfect sentences. The woman who blushed at a napkin drawing. The woman who's been pretending to be made of ice when she's actually made of fire. I wanted to protest, to list all the reasons why this was a mistake, why she should find someone more suitable. But she wasn't asking for reassurance. She was giving it. Okay, I whispered, and she smiled, pulling me closer. Okay, she agreed and kissed me again. 3 months later, Fiona got accepted to an artist residency in Vermont. 3 months of intensive work, networking with other artists, and focusing on her craft. It was an incredible opportunity, the kind of thing that could launch her career to the next level. I was proud of her. I was also terrified. We were standing in the airport terminal, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, my carefully composed mask slipping with every passing minute. I'd driven her here, of course. It was what girlfriends did. Though we'd never officially used that word, the relationship had evolved into something that felt permanent, essential. You could visit, she said softly, adjusting the strap of her bag. I stiffened. The invitation was casual, but I could hear the hope underneath it. I have deadlines, I said, which was a lie. I always had deadlines, but I also always managed to work around the things that mattered. The truth was, I was afraid. Afraid of what it would mean to visit her in Vermont, to meet her fellow artist, to be introduced as what? Her girlfriend? Her lover? The older woman she was seeing? The thought of being categorized, judged, found wanting it made my chest tight. Fiona's smile faltered just for a second before she leaned in, pressing a kiss to my cheek. Okay, but just so you know, I'll miss you. And she walked away, disappearing into the security line with a final wave. I ached. Not just the surface sadness of missing someone, but a deep, bone-deep ache that made me understand. Perhaps for the first time, what it meant to love someone. The next 3 months were the longest of my life. I threw myself into work, accepting every assignment, attending every gallery opening, filling my calendar so completely that I wouldn't have time to think about the absence in my life, but it didn't work. Everything reminded me of her. The art I critiqued lacked her emotional honesty. The wine I drank alone tasted flat. My apartment felt too quiet, too clean, too empty. She called every few days, her voice full of excitement about the work she was doing, the artists she was meeting, the techniques she was learning. I listened and made appropriate responses, but inside I was dying. Not because I was jealous, though. There was some of that, but because I realized I'd been living in black and white before she came into my life. And now everything without her felt gray. I'm thinking about extending my stay, she said during one of our calls, 6 weeks into the residency. There's an opportunity to show my work in a gallery in Burlington, and that's wonderful. I interrupted, though my heart was breaking. You should absolutely do what's best for your career. There was a pause. Chelsea, are you okay? You sound... I'm fine, I said, which was becoming my standard response to everything. Just tired, long day, another pause. I love you, you. Know that, right? It was the first time she'd said it. The first time either of us had said it. And instead of saying it back, instead of letting myself have this moment of connection, I panicked. I should go, I said. Early morning tomorrow. Oh, okay. I love you, she said again, and I could hear the hurt in her voice. Talk soon, I replied and hung up before I could say something I regret, like I love you too, like please come home, like I'm sorry I'm such a coward. 2 weeks later, the call stopped. Not abruptly, they tapered off gradually, becoming shorter, less frequent, more polite. I told myself it was because she was busy, because the residency was demanding, because she was focused on her work, but deep down, I knew the truth. I'd hurt her, and she was protecting herself. I'd been protecting myself too, but from what? From love, from happiness, from the possibility that someone might actually want to stay. The realization hit me one evening as I sat in my apartment, a glass of wine in hand, surrounded by the art I'd collected over the years. Beautiful pieces, each one carefully chosen, each one safe. None of them moved me the way Fiona's work did. None of them challenged me or made me feel anything beyond aesthetic appreciation. I was living a curator's life surrounded by beauty, but never really participating in it. That's when I made a decision. I booked a flight to Vermont. But when I called the residency center the next morning to surprise her, they told me she'd left early. 3 days ago, she was back in the city. I drove to her apartment, my heart pounding. What if she didn't want to see me? What if I'd waited too long, been too careful, too afraid? Her neighbor told me she'd been back for a few days, but was spending most of her time at the community center, working on something for an upcoming show. I found her there in the same room where we'd first met, surrounded by canvases and paint supplies. She was working on a large painting, 2 figures intertwined, but I couldn't make out the details from where I stood in the doorway. Fiona? She turned, and I saw the surprise in her eyes, followed quickly by something more guarded. Chelsea, what are you doing here? I wanted to surprise you in Vermont, I said, stepping into the room. But you'd already left. The residency was... She paused, wiping her hands on a rag. It was good, educational, but I realized I had everything I needed here. I'm sorry, I said, and the words felt inadequate. I'm sorry I didn't visit. I'm sorry I didn't say it back when you said you loved me. I'm sorry I've been so afraid of this, of us, of what it means. She studied my face, and I could see her deciding whether to let me in or protect herself. What does it mean, Chelsea? It means I love you, I said, and the words came out easier than I'd expected. It means I've been miserable without you. It means I want to stop being afraid of my own happiness. She set down her brush but didn't move toward me. And what about all the reasons this is complicated? The age difference, the fact that I'm still figuring out my career, the fact that you're used to a certain lifestyle. I don't care about any of that, I said, taking a step closer. I care about you. I care about the way you see the world, the way you make me see myself differently. I care about the way you laugh and the way you challenge me and the way you make me want to be braver. She was quiet for a long moment, and I wondered if I'd waited too long, if my fear had cost me. The best thing that had ever happened to me. I missed you too, she said finally, and I felt something in my chest release. Really? Really? But Chelsea, I can't keep doing this dance where you pull me close and then push me away when it gets scary. I need to know you're in this. I'm in this, I said, and meant it. I'm terrified, but I'm in this. She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen from her since I'd walked into the room. Good, because I have something to show you. She led me to the painting she'd been working on, the one with the two figures. As we got closer, I realized what I was looking at. It was us. Me and Fiona, tangled in bedsheets, my face softer than I'd ever seen it, her hand resting on my hip like she was claiming me. It was intimate and beautiful and utterly honest. I painted this while I was away, she said, when I was missing you, when I was trying to figure out if what we had was real or just, it's real, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It's the most real thing I've ever felt. She turned to face me fully then, and I saw everything I'd been afraid to hope for in her eyes. Love, yes, but also commitment, determination, a willingness to fight for us. I lied about something, she said. The residency wasn't 3 months. It was only supposed to be 2. I came back early because I missed you too much to stay away. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to run toward love instead of away from it. 6 months later, Fiona proposed. Not in some fancy restaurant or exotic location, but right there in the community center art room where we'd first met. Surrounded by half-finished canvases and the scent of turpentine with the Tuesday night art therapy group as our witnesses. I was working on a painting, something I'd taken up again after realizing that creating art was different from critiquing it, that there was joy in the process that had nothing to do with the final product. It was a landscape, inspired by a weekend trip we'd taken to the mountains, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was capturing something real. Chelsea, Fiona said, and something in her voice made me look up. She was on one knee beside my easel, paint smudged on her jeans, holding out a ring. But not just any ring, she'd made it herself, crafting a band from a paintbrush handle and setting it with a small piece of sea glass we'd found during a walk on the beach. You once told me my art was derivative, she said, grinning despite the nervousness I could see in her eyes. I did, I said, my heart racing. But this us, there's nothing like it. There's no template for what we have, no rules about how it's supposed to work. We're making it up as we go along, and it's messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. She took a shaky breath. I love your intelligence and your passion and the way you pretend to be tougher than you are. I love that you're teaching me about wine and I'm teaching you about finger painting. I love that you're brave enough to let me love you, even when it scares you. Fiona, I whispered, because I could see where this was going, and I was overwhelmed by the rightness of it. Marry me, Chelsea. Let's make something beautiful together. I looked around the room at the other art therapy participants who had stopped their own work to watch, at Sarah, the instructor who was wiping away tears, at the paintings on the walls that represented so many people's attempts to express the inexpressible. And I laughed. Bright, unguarded, the kind of laugh that Fiona had been coaxing out of me for months. Yes, I said, and she slipped the ring onto my finger. It was rough and imperfect and utterly perfect. Yes, she asked, as if she couldn't quite believe it. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I love you. Yes to all of it. She stood up and kissed me right there, in front of the acrylics and the watercolors and the entire Tuesday night art class. And I kissed her back, not caring who was watching, not caring about anything except the woman in my arms and life. We were going to build together, because some love stories aren't just told, they're painted, messy, and beautiful and real. We were married 6 months later in that same community center, surrounded by friends and family and enough flowers, too. Stuck a florist shop. Fiona wore a vintage dress she'd found at a thrift store and altered herself, adding splashes of color with embroidered flowers. I wore a simple white dress that cost more than my car, but paired it with the painted canvas sneakers she'd made. Me as a wedding gift. My mother flew in from Arizona, still bewildered by my choice to marry someone from the arts, but charmed despite herself by Fiona's enthusiasm and obvious adoration of me. My colleagues from the magazine were there, looking slightly out of place among the artists and therapists and community center regulars, but gradually relaxing as the wine flowed and Fiona's friends drew them into conversations about everything. From gallery politics to the best pizza in the city, Dr. Martinez, my therapist, officiated. It turned out she was ordained online specifically for the occasion, which made both of us cry. Sarah from art therapy did a reading about the courage it takes to create something new, whether it's a painting or a life. But the moment I'll remember forever came during our first dance. We'd chosen a song by Norah Jones, something slow and sweet that wouldn't challenge my limited dancing skills. As we swayed together in the center of the room, surrounded by the soft glow of string lights and the faces of people who loved us, Fiona whispered in my ear, "No regrets?" I pulled back to look at her, this woman who had turned my carefully ordered life upside down in the best possible way. Only that it took me so long to find you. We found each other exactly when we were supposed to, she said, and kissed me as our friends and family applauded. Now, 2 years later, I'm sitting in our shared studio, the spare bedroom in the apartment we moved into after we got married, watching Fiona work on a new series of paintings. She's been commissioned by a gallery downtown, her first major solo show, and I couldn't be prouder. My own easel sits in the corner, holding a half-finished portrait of her that I've been working on for months. I'm still learning, still discovering that creating art is harder than critiquing it, but also more rewarding. There's something magical about bringing something new into the world, about taking raw materials and transforming them into something that didn't exist before. I still write art criticism, but my perspective has changed. I'm gentler now, more interested in what an artist is trying to express than in whether they've succeeded according to some arbitrary standard. My editor says my writing has become more accessible, more human. I take that as a compliment. Fiona still goes to art therapy, though now she helps Sarah facilitate the sessions. I still go too, partly because I find it helpful, but mostly because I love watching her work with newcomers, seeing her offer the same kind of patient encouragement she once gave me. We're different people than we were when we met. I'm more spontaneous, more willing to take risks. She's more grounded, more focused on building something lasting. But we're also exactly who we were meant to be together, two people who chose to create something beautiful out of unexpected circumstances. There are still challenges. The age difference occasionally rears its head, usually in small ways, her references to pop culture I don't understand, my worries about retirement planning while she's still building her career. But we've learned to navigate these moments with humor and honesty, to see them as opportunities for growth rather than insurmountable obstacles. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd skipped that first art therapy session. If I convinced my therapist I was fine and didn't need to process anything through finger painting, would I have met Fiona some other way? Would I have recognized what she offered if I hadn't been primed to see it? But then I remember what she told me once. We found each other exactly when we were supposed to. I was ready to be seen, to be loved, to be changed. And she was ready to do the seeing and loving and changing. That's the thing about love. It's not about finding the perfect person at the perfect time. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be brave, who sees the best in you even when you can't see it yourself, who's willing to create something new with you even when you don't know what that something will look like. As I watch Fiona work, her face scrunched in concentration, her hands moving with the confidence of someone who has found her calling, I think about the painting she's working on. It's part of a series she calls Transformations Abstract Pieces that explore the way people change when they allow themselves to be truly seen. The one she's working on now is a swirl of colors that seems to shift and change as you look at it, moving from cool blues and grays to warm reds and golds. It's beautiful and dynamic and utterly alive. What do you think? She asks, stepping back to survey her work. I think, I say, getting up from my own easel to stand beside her, that you're going to change the way people see art. She laughs, bumping my shoulder with hers. You say that about everything I paint. That's because it's true, I tell her, and mean it. You have a gift, Fiona. You see things differently, and you help other people see them differently too. She turns to look at me, paint-stained and beautiful and mine. You know what I see when I look at you? What? Someone who's finally learned to live in color. And she's right. Before Fiona, I lived in black and white safe, predictable, carefully controlled. Now my life is full of color, full of mess and beauty and unexpected joy. I wake up each morning not knowing exactly what the day will bring, but knowing that whatever it is, we'll face it together. That's what love is, I think. Not the fairy tale version where everything is perfect and easy, but the real version where you choose each other every day, where you create something beautiful together despite the challenges, where you learn to see the world through each other's eyes. We're still writing our story, Fiona and I still painting it, really adding new colors and textures as we go. And I can't wait to see what we create next. As I look at her now, focused on her work, but aware of my presence beside her, I realize that this is what happiness looks like. Not the grand gestures or dramatic moments, but the quiet satisfaction of building a life with someone who sees you, really sees you, and loves what they find. I'm Chelsea Wright, and I'm 54 years old, and I'm just getting started. Because some love stories aren't just told, they're lived, messy and beautiful and real, one brushstroke at a time.